I've been asked to give advice about what to do with large chunks of money. Well, that's a colloquial way of saying large sums of money, a large chunk. So, what constitutes a large chunk? Is it 1% of your entire net assets? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? I would certainly consider 10% a large chunk. I've never put 10% of what I personally was worth, as the world looks at as far as monetary worth. I've never moved 10% into anything that had risk to it. Now, I'm talking about not putting it into cash assets. You can certainly move large chunks of money into passbook savings, into CDs, without risk of losing that. But as far as something that would actually make a good growth investment, a good dividend investment, I personally never put large chunks in. Sometimes I put a little more than usual when I see what I consider is a good deal, stock that is on sale, a ETF that is on sale, mutual funds. If I were to put a large chunk, it would be into mutual funds rather than into any individual stock or even an ETF. Remember, an ETF is a little bundle of stocks, so it's somewhere between an individual company and a mutual fund. ETFs are spread over several companies in a certain sector. So I never do that. Now, why do I never put a large chunk in? Well, I'll tell you why. I'm just what you'd call a passive investor. I do not make my living by my investments. I get supplemental income, or at least I could get supplemental income from my investments. At this point, I've not taken any of that supplemental income. I have allowed it to drip. In other words, I reinvest my dividends and gains, capital gains, right back into the funds or the stocks. I have not taken any of those. I'm saving those for my later years. Now I'm getting closer and closer to my later years. But yet I have not taken, as of yet, I've not taken any dividends or capital gains directly to me for an income. So I'm a passive investor. And I'm really, to be honest and candid and to be transparent with you, I'm not smart enough to put a big chunk into a stock or any of these different vehicles. I'm not smart enough to put in a big lump sum. I don't know when is the very best time. So I use what's called dollar cost averaging, that I put it in over time. Currently am investing a little bit every single week. Up until the last couple of years, I invested at least once a month. Sometimes I'd invest twice a month, but I did not do it as rapidly and as often as I do now. Today I put little teeny fractions basically in every single week. If I can find what I consider deals, I make a little investment. And when I mean deals, I try not to buy when the market is at its very highest. I do try to watch for slight dips in the market and to time the market slightly, but no one can time the market perfectly. You can't do that. So I only invest in things that a Christian should invest in. I don't invest in sin stock. And so that limits who I'll invest in. But then beyond that, I don't invest in things that I know nothing about. I need to know something about it before I'll even make my tiny investments. And then I've got to know it's a pretty good company, not for the short term, but for the long term. When you invest in individual stocks, you're investing in that company. We're investing in the backs of American workers. And I thank God for workers. And work is taught in the Bible. If a man doesn't work, he's not supposed to eat. And if a man does not supply the needs of his family, he's worse than an infidel, the Bible teaches. A man must supply the physical needs, but also the spiritual needs and all of the needs of his family. But as a passive investor, I just don't put big chunks in. I have one exception to that. I'm going to tell you what I consider a chunk of money. When the pandemic first started in March of 2020, and the market went down substantially, well, within a few days of that, I began speculating, I think I should put some money in. And so within a month, I could go back and look at the exact day. But my wife and I put two $2,000 investments for a total of $4,000 into mutual funds at the beginning of the pandemic. Now for us, that's a chunk of money. $4,000, a lot of money. And we had it sitting where we could move it, had it as buying power, and waiting for opportunities to invest. And so that was for us a chunk of money. For someone as wealthy as Warren Buffett, $4,000 is not a chunk of money. But for me, Evangelist Byron Fox, $4,000 is a lot of money for me and Renee. But what happened to our chunk that we put in that one time? Well, it's more than doubled in value. Now it's worth about $9,000. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? In 2 years to more than double in value. Of course, in pure buying power, it has not doubled in value because, inflation has eaten at it. And so the $4,000 we originally put in, if we still had the $4,000 and had not invested, it would be with less buying power than what it did 2 years ago. Are you following what I'm saying? Okay, so as far as chunks of money, I've really not done that. I've been investing in mutual funds and stock market and that kind of stuff for 39 years. I'm a tiny investor. At age 30, Renee and I had to take all of our money out and pay for some hardships that came. Hardships come. And so we started over at age 30. So now for 28 years, we've been back investing. And the first several years as an evangelist, when I started as an evangelist 28 years ago, I got back to investing, and I made sure we put at least a few dollars a month. That's all we could afford. And we had to force ourselves to even put a few dollars. It was just dollars. Many of those months, it was $10 that we invested. That's a tiny investment. But for the discipline of the matter, I knew that I needed to do something. And $10 is hardly anything today, 28 years later. But that's about all I could do certain months. But since then, by the grace of God, my income has risen, and I've learned different ways to make money. But even now, I do not put big chunks of money. I've had somebody say to me, well, if you'd put a big chunk into such and such investment, you would have made a lot of money. Yes, that's true. I have invested in some things that have had some very nice returns. I'm thinking of one right now that I've told several of my buddies about, that I began investing in a company about 6 months ago, and they have rapidly grown. Now, if I'd have put a huge chunk of money in back in November, wow, that could have really made some money. The reason I don't do that is because I can't afford to lose large chunks of money. So I have preferred to just little by little. That's what I have found. And I think that's 90% of successful investors. 90% of the successful investors do it over time and over the long haul, not trying to get just a 1 week huge return. That's not the way I do it. Now, if God leads you that way, you follow the Lord. God has not led me to do it that way. I just invest a little bit every single week now, and once a month I put in a larger chunk into my mutual funds, but it's still not A big chunk. I'm careful about the big chunks because you don't want to lose a big chunk. Now, we're talking about investing. May I remind you that the very best investment is still investing into the work of the Lord. Give your time. Give whatever funds that have come to you. Don't just give a tithe. Give offerings on top of your tithes. If you want to see miracles from God, give offerings. Tithing is just the starting point. No. You tithe on all your increase, but then you give offerings in addition to that. By the grace of God, Renee and I right now are having our biggest giving year. Last year was our biggest giving year until that point, which was in excess of the year before that. Each of the last several years, we have been able to substantially give more. Now, for us, substantially may not be the same amount as others, but for us, it's substantial, the improvement we've made, and we're thankful about that. So let's continue following the Lord in this matter of our finances. May God bless.